tuned in to Kool Ghoul Radio. Don't miss a second.
Jacob Platt was a moron, and everyone in town knew it. Everyone also knew about his affair, but he was big and mean, so he did whatever he wanted. He'd leave the lumber mill every day after work and meet up with Carol Ann, the hot-to-trot blonde waitress down at Denning's. They'd run to the bathroom for a round of patty cake and, after a minute, walk out looking pleased with themselves. It didn't take rocket science to figure out what they were doing in a bathroom with one toilet. Besides, the John was out of order. The bowl cracked after someone put too much weight on the seat. Lord knows what Carol Ann saw in him. He wasn't good looking. His face was a lunar landscape with a swollen red pepper nose below saggy eyelids, barely visible under a mop of oily black hair. But whatever the reason, the two were shacking up, and poor Deanna, Jacob's wife, didn't have a clue. Eventually, Carol Ann grew tired of the sneaking and met Jacob in the parking lot to confront him. "Rumors are starting, and people are talking about me like I'm some floozy," she said. "You ain't?" She slapped his shoulder. "You need to commit to one of us, and it better be me. You want me to divorce Deanna and lose half of everything I own? Nah, I like the situation as it is." "Not divorce her. That's worse. I'm no homewrecker." She checked to see if the parking lot was empty. "I want you to kill her." "Are you crazy?" he said, louder than he meant, but she shushed him. "Shut up, you big dumb fool. I got a cousin, you know, the homely looking one who works down at Joe's Crab Shack, tire repair, and fly fishing emporium. Well, she's been playing with Voodoo, trying to catch herself a man. We thought she was crazy, the poor thing, but one day she comes waltzing up the driveway with this young hunk barely out of high school hanging off her arm. Maybe the kid just likes some balding and smelling of cheese. Damn it, Jacob, I'm not fooling around." He sighed. "All right, well, what am I gonna do?" "You make a doll, and whatever you do, it will happen to Deanna." "Sounds easy enough. How do I make this doll?" Carol Ann rolled her eyes. "Hell if I know. Look it up on the internet. That's what she did." "All right, I'll figure something out then." Jacob went home and searched for how to make a voodoo doll. He watched the first few videos on his computer and took notes, minimizing the window whenever his wife Deanna walked past. Making a voodoo doll looked complicated and required skills he didn't have, like pattern making, sewing, and cutting fabric. The videos were vague on how to make the doll, except that he needed a piece of the victim and some blood. But what kind of fabric should he use? The whole mess seemed complicated and confusing, and that pissed him off, so he took a nap. Deanna woke him up an hour later. She said he needed a haircut. He sat in the kitchen and ruminated around while she clipped away. Then it came to him. "Hey, Dee, I need you to help me make a doll." "What do you need a doll for?" He grabbed her thigh through her dress and twisted the skin. She yelped in pain. "Don't matter why I need it, just that I do. Now I asked you something." He squeezed harder to emphasize his point. "I'll help." He let go of her leg, and after a moment of sniffling and whimpering, she continued clipping his hair, and he felt good, big, and tough. Deanna was timid, easy to boss around, and he liked that. But timid gets boring. Carol Ann was a firecracker. His threats didn't intimidate her because she held the power as long as he was cheating. But once Deanna was gone and Carol Ann was his, he'd enjoy breaking her spirit. He leaned back in the chair and ran his tongue across his teeth, enjoying the thought. "I've got some old shirts of ours I was planning on making dish rags out of. Will these do?" she asked, tilting his head and clipping around his ears. He brushed her long blonde hair out of his face. "Yeah, they'll do fine," he said. An old shirt should be personal enough, he reasoned. Deanna finished the haircut and swept the piles of hair in the kitchen, while Jacob watched TV in the living room. He felt good about the voodoo doll situation. The whole complicated mess was out of his hands, and Deanna would make the thing that would kill her. The thought amused him, and he chuckled. He woke up later that night, turned off the TV, and shambled to the empty bed, and fell asleep to the sound of Deanna's sewing machine in the next room. That morning, Deanna brought him the doll while he ate his breakfast, cradling it delicately in her hands. The thing was ugly. It was obvious she used a gingerbread man and cookie cutter for the pattern. A tuft of dark hair topped the doll's head. Two off-center button eyes sat above a wide and crooked smile she'd drawn on with a pin. "Not my best work, but I think he's cute," she said, and bounced the doll across the table towards Jacob like it was walking. "The hell are you so perky about? It looks like shit. I should have made the damn thing myself." Her smile vanished, and he felt good. He snatched the doll from her hands. The sharp pain of the forgotten sewing pin drove itself deep into his thumb. Jacob yelped and threw the doll to the ground. Deanna bent down and picked up the doll. "I'm sorry, I was tired," she said, pulling the sewing pin out of the doll. Jacob moved fast. He grabbed Deanna by her collar and pulled her across the table, spilling his oatmeal on the floor. "Now look what you made me do!" He raised his hand to hit her, but something squeezed his wrist, and in one swift, fluid moment, his arm bent against the elbow, and the joint snapped. He dropped Deanna and grabbed the pulpy blob of shattered bone and cartilage that was once his elbow. She crawled off the table and composed herself. "We'll have none of that, Jacob Platt," she said, picking the oatmeal off her dress. Jacob sobbed, cradling his backward arm. "What the hell did you do to me?" She bent the doll's arm. Jacob howled in pain. His broken arm twisted further, the bones grinding against each other with a sickening crunch. "Give me the doll, Deanna, please. I'm sorry." "You were planning on murdering me." "I ain't anymore. Now give me the doll." "No," she said. "You don't talk to me that way, you understand? You do as I say," he said as he got to his feet. "I ain't kowtowing with you no more," she said, her voice wavering. Jacob swung at her. His aim was off, and his fist skimmed the tip of her nose. She bent the doll's leg up, and his leg followed. Snapping upwards with such a force, he left the ground, landing hard on his back. He groaned in pain. "You afraid?" she asked. Jacob nodded. "Good." She bent the doll's other leg at the thigh, pulling it back until the stumpy foot touched the back of the doll's head, and Jacob followed suit. He lay on the ground, a moaning, drooling pretzel. "How'd you know?" "You didn't clear your search history." She grabbed the doll by the head and squeezed. His eyes bulged. Panicked, he looked from the doll to her and pleaded, "No." She took a deep breath and twisted. Jacob's head spun around and he dropped dead. Deanna set the doll on the table and sighed, running her hand through her blonde hair. She fixed a cup of coffee and grabbed her bullet journal, drawing a line through "See Jacob off." She took a sip of coffee and circled "Swing by Dennings for lunch." Today would be a busy day.
Don't play Jenny Two Pennies. Marcy and I did, and now she's dead, and I'm being haunted by the ghost of a cheerleader named Jenny, and she's awful. She insults me, my clothing, weight, haircut, room decor, everything. She wants me to acknowledge her. See, that's her shtick. She can't do anything unless I look at her or talk to her. She's stuck haunting me, and she's a raging bee about it. It's been a week since Marcy died. It was right after homecoming. Every year we would crash at each other's house after the football game, and then spend Saturday preparing for the dance. This was our thing, and this year it was Marcy's turn to host. I preferred her place since she had a bigger TV, plus her dad was a fellow licorice fiend and always kept a tub on hand that I'd raid late at night. I know, I have a problem. Marcy really went off the deep end when her brother Blair disappeared from school. He was into weird stuff too. He kept stacks of notebooks filled with stories about how weird our town is, which is how Marcy learned about Jenny Two Pennies. According to Blair's notes, Jenny was a cheerleader who loved to gossip. And one day, in science class, she got too involved in her whisper campaign and stopped paying attention to what she was doing. And she melted her face off. Bunsen burners are the worst. And now she's a goopy-faced ghost with a habit of eavesdropping. The coppery glow of the Bunsen burner forever reflected in her sunken eyes, barely visible beneath her swollen flesh. That's the Two Pennies part. I guess that adds a little flair. I mean, Two Pennies is better than Pizza Shitface or Jenny the Crispy Cheerleader. You can't hear her, but she's screaming obscenities at the back of my head. She's sensitive about her nickname. Anyway, if you summon Jenny, she'll answer whatever question you ask. That's her gimmick, and Marcy figured it was her best shot to learn what happened to her brother, so I don't blame her. However, I might have reconsidered had I known the price for breaking the rules of Jenny's invocation. After the football game, we went to Marcy's house, which I assumed meant a night of merriment, so I brought my DVD of the American classic, Romy and Michelle's High School Reunion. Great movie, phenomenal, I highly recommend it. We didn't even get to watch it, and Marcy never will, because she's dead. Another of Jenny Fondue Face's crimes against humanity. Instead, we stood in Marcy's bathroom facing the mirror with the lights off and a lit candle. Now, I'm about to explain how to summon Jenny Two Pennies for educational reasons, like the more you know type of thing. An interesting fact, but hopefully you'll never use this knowledge. Stand in the bathroom with the lights out, light a candle and say, "Jenny Two Pennies, Jenny Two Pennies," and that's when you ask your question. Then you set the timer for 5 minutes and stare into the eyes of your own reflection. If you do it right and keep eye contact with your reflection, your face will look weird, like seriously messed up. It's gross, but don't look away. Don't break eye contact, smile, frown, or even twitch your lip, or Jenny will latch onto you and haunt your ass, and you really don't want that. You can't move for 5 whole minutes. The moment our reflection changed, we screamed. We screamed so loud, I'm sure they heard us 2 counties over, and we ran out of the bathroom. I couldn't even go back in there until it was light outside, and my bladder still hasn't recovered. Well, nothing happened, and by morning, we were laughing about the whole thing. We thought it was just a silly game. It wasn't until the dance that we realized how serious the situation was. The homecoming dance was in our school's cafeteria, a circular commons area bordered by lockers and vending machines on one side, and a massive floor-to-ceiling window that looked out onto the courtyard. We were having so much fun, and of course Marcy and I looked extra cute in our outfits. Our ghostly adventure was the farthest thing from our mind until the second song, when Marcy just started screaming, like song-stopping, blood-curdling screams. She was absolutely hysterical. I rushed her outside to the courtyard. The October night air was way colder than I expected, so miniskirt was a very poor choice. That's when she told me. "I saw her, in the window's reflection. I saw her," Marcy said. I didn't even understand. "Who?" I asked. "Jenny, she was standing behind me. Standing behind me in a cheerleader outfit and everything. I saw her face and it was all messed up." "You didn't see anything. It's dark and everyone's cramped together, jumping around. Your mind is just playing tricks on you. That dumb game scared you this bad?" And that's when she leaned in and looked me in the eye. "I'm telling you, I saw her. Sure as shit I saw her." You know that wide-eyed, tiny pupil look some crazy people have, like runaway bride crazy or drive cross-country in a diaper to surprise marry an astronaut crazy? Yeah, Marcy had that look. I'm nowhere near capable of being able to deal with that kind of crazy, so I didn't know how to respond. I just shrugged and said, "Okay." She didn't seem too happy. "Well, you saw a ghost, and that's cool, I guess." "No, you don't understand. We messed up, and now she's haunting us. She'll kill us if we even look or talk to her. It said so in Blair's notebook, and oh God, I looked right into her eyes." And that's when she leaned onto my shoulder and started crying. I'm not gonna lie, that messed me up a little bit. I tried to reassure her, but I'm not the best at comforting people, or even peopling in general. Honestly, I flat out suck at it. "We should go home," I told her. She said she didn't want to be alone, and she did look terrified, so I told her I would go get the car. The whole ride home was very quiet. Marcy had mentally checked out, and she spent the whole drive staring at her feet and refused to look at any of the mirrors in the car. As I was driving, I thought I caught the vague shape of a girl in what might have been a yellow and blue cheerleading uniform, and she was standing at the side of the road. I wasn't sure, and honestly, I was too scared to check the rearview mirror. Marcy's paranoia was starting to rub off on me. Her parents' car was in the driveway, which was a huge relief, so I parked on the street and helped Marcy out of her car. The whole house was dark. I heard snoring from a closed bedroom door, which I assumed was her dad. Your parents have the right idea. She just kept staring at her feet, so I helped her to her bedroom, and I sat with her until she fell asleep, which, thank God, didn't take very long. By this time I was starving, so I raided the fridge for some leftover pizza. As it sizzled in the toaster oven, I just kept thinking about the things Marcy had said at the dance, the cheerleader that I thought I saw, and considered the possibility that maybe Jenny Two Pennies was after us. As I looked down the hallway, I caught a glimpse of someone dressed in a blue and yellow outfit. Marcy let out a horrifying scream. I ran to her door. Suddenly, the door slammed shut on me, throwing me backwards into the hallway. All of the commotion had woken her parents, who were already there helping me off the floor. As her parents shouted to her, I could hear the sounds of a struggle, things breaking, and a strange girl's voice yelling obscenities. The door shook violently as something slammed into it. And then it just stopped. Her parents were finally able to open the door. Her mattress and bed frame were slumped up against the wall. Her closet doors were wide open, with all of her clothing strewn across the floor. Splashes of what looked like black paint or something were sloshed across the walls like a Pollock painting. And poor Marcy, she was laying in the middle of the room with her back bent the wrong way over the dresser, and her legs were broken into a W. Her head, it was upside down and propped up by an open drawer. That was a week ago, and since then, little Miss Sludgeface has been trying to trick me into looking at her. Sucks for her, though, since I am the queen of ignoring people. On my last visit to Marcy's parents' house, I snuck Blair's notebooks out of Marcy's room. And let me just say, for a middle schooler, this kid kept some detailed notes. Once I'm done dealing with Jenny, I've got a whole town's worth of ghosts to exorcise, and I'll make sure that no one else suffers the way that Marcy did.
That morning I woke up feeling sour. No particular reason, just an unpleasant feeling the moment I opened my eyes. Outside the birds were chirping and the sun was shining, but I wasn't about to let this good day ruin a perfectly rotten mood. My brain was dead set on feeling grumpy. I stumbled into the kitchen, waving half-heartedly at my brother Brian sitting at the kitchen table and polishing off what was probably his second bowl of Fruit Loops. "Morning, shit kicker," he said between bites. I ignored him and fished around the sink for a clean-looking cup and settled on one of Brian's collectible Flintstone mugs, the one shaped like Barney Rubble's head, and gave it a quick rinse. "By the way, I got a message for you." He got up from the table and reached into his back jeans pocket, farted into his hand, and mashed a fart hand over my face. "Cup of cheese." "Jerk," I said, pushing him off me. "You're on your way to a whoop butt. You know I can't stand that toilet humor. It ain't refined. It ain't fit for a Hardy to debase himself like that." Which was true. Our daddy, Willoughby T. Hardy, was the funniest man down at Jill's gas station, tractor repair, and sandwich shop. He grew up fixing to be a comedian, but a detour into physical comedy left him unable to talk. He'd sit me on his knee and write, "Potty humor don't take no skill. Anyone can do it. Ain't even worth the effort it takes to push one out." And I knew he was serious because he wrote the words real big like he was yelling. "Oh, I don't mean nothing by it," Brian said and sat back down. "We're out of beans," I said, sifting through a cupboard filled with half-empty pancake and brown sugar bags. "Weren't you supposed to get some?" "I've got a few right here," Brian said, leaned to one side and cut a long fart. Well, that set me off. I whirled around and yelled, "I told you I can't stand lowbrow humor. We's refined," and I brought the mug down on the back of his head. There was a sharp crack, and the back of Brian's head caved in. He wobbled for a second, then fell face first into his bowl of Fruit Loops. "Oh, you've done it now, Clint Hardy. You've gone and murdered your brother. Man, your folks are gonna be pissed." I winced, looking from the brain-splattered Flintstone mug I held in my hand to the Barney-shaped imprint on the back of my brother's head. "You sure did a number on him. Smashed his brains in good. I warned you. I told you if you didn't stop farting at, on, or around me, I'd knock your block off. Just didn't mean to knock it so hard. It's your own fault," I said to Brian. He was dead, so he didn't respond. But then, as if he was mocking me, he farted. The end-all be-all of farts. The final fart. Power blast of wind and whatever undigested food left inside him so strong it pooched the back of his pants. I lost my temper, and with an explosion of brains, blood, and cereal, I put another Barney-shaped dent in the top of his head. "Oh, shoot! He did it again. Clint, you dumb fool. They're gonna put you away. Or worse, give you a lifetime of community service. I'd be working the side of the road, picking up trash, and the neighbors would say, "There goes that boy what murdered his brother." I don't think I could take the embarrassment. I fished the last Pop-Tart out of the box. It was a variety pack, and I wanted a frosted strawberry, but got plain instead. This just wasn't my day. Popping the tart in the toaster, I looked out the kitchen window and ruminated on my situation. The rainy season hit us pretty hard, and somehow the well we were digging overflowed, turning our backyard into a swamp. A government fella came over and declared it a wetland, so it's protected on account of a rare fish what was living in the hole we dug. The toaster dinged. I didn't wait for the Pop-Tart to cool. I bit into it, burning the roof of my mouth, but the pain stimulated something in my brain, and an idea formed. "Clint Hardy, you're a genius." I loaded Brian into the canoe with a large cinder block I tied around his ankles, and pushed off. The water wasn't deep except for over the well we'd dug, which was more of a pit than anything else. We drifted to a stop over the hole, and doing my best not to capsize the boat, I rolled the body overboard. The cinder block shot downwards with a jerk, and in an instant sucked Brian into the darkness with it. I waved goodbye and paddled myself back to shore. Weeks went by and things were good. The trailer was cleaned for the first time in months, and I replaced the bunk bed with a fancy fold-out one. The best part was I didn't have to put up with any more potty humor. I had almost forgotten about the body in the well, until one night I woke up to the sound of splashing. I figured it was probably some kind of animal, but then the thing called my name, in a long, wet, burbling moan. I heard the front door open, and the sound of wet feet slapping against the floor as the thing approached my bedroom door. "Clint, wake up. Your brother's home." And the door to my room creaked open. Standing in the doorway was Brian, swollen and soaked to the bone. His flesh was pale blue and half rotten. One eye bulged from a swollen socket while the other was dark and empty. "Old Clint, if you ain't a sight for sore eye," he gurgled. "I've got something for you." He shambled forwards until he could rest his bloated gut on the foot of my bed. The belly button, once an innie, had popped outwards and looked like a blue chestnut which he thumbed at. "Now, Brian, what happened was an accident. I didn't know what else to do, and you can't blame me for doing what I did and dumping you in that well out back. You know I'm too fragile for jail. That's all in the past. I need you to do one thing for me." He hoisted himself onto my bed, his stomach pressing into my feet. Yeah? What's that?" He held up a swollen, waterlogged hand and pointed at me. With a smile, he said, "Pull my finger."
It was a chilly November night, and Becky was dead. Slumped against the cabinets in her kitchen, an axe stuck square between her eyes, her head nearly split in two. Mary wasn't dead. She was alive, albeit exhausted from putting the business end of her axe in Becky's head. She hadn't planned on killing her. They were neighbors and had gotten along, until Becky started making eyes at her husband and swinging by her house during Mary's work hours, which, in Mary's mind, wasn't the neighborly thing to do. Something needed to be done. When she turned up in Becky's kitchen that night, she meant to scare her, make her think twice before flirting with her man. But Mary stood a skinny 5'3", a foot shorter than Becky. That's why she'd brought the splitting maul. But the two got to arguing, and Mary set to chopping. By the third swing, Becky was dead, and by the 40th, Mary's arms were tired. "You've done it now," she said, sitting down at the kitchen table to catch her breath and to pick the squishy bits of gore from her blouse and hair. "You're in a dill of a pickle, Mary Lee Wilkins." She slumped back in the chair, closed her eyes, and sighed. A real dill of a pickle. She was unsure what to do. This was her first murder, so she was treading in unfamiliar territory. But there's a first time for everything. And as her ma would say, a Wilkins always finishes what they start. While her ma wouldn't approve of murder, Mary figured the phrase probably still applied to the situation. She looked at the kitchen. A thick splash of maroon coated the walls and floor. This would be a long night. Hopefully, Becky kept her cleaning supplies well stocked. Blood is near impossible to scrub out. At the back of Mary's mind, she wondered if she remembered to record tonight's Jeopardy. A sliding glass door connected the kitchen to a flower garden Becky had covered in a thick, winterized tarp to protect the plants from the cold. Mary figured this was a decent enough spot to hide the body. She could dispose of the body proper in March when the snow thawed. Good thing Becky spent the holidays out of town. Maybe she could dump the body in some remote location, like a farmland or swamp. Worked for those killers on Unsolved Mysteries. But she dismissed the thought. What with the price of gas these days? Nope, backyard burial it is. She took a shovel from the garage and dug a shallow pit, right behind a row of impatiens, one of Mary's favorite flowers. Becky may have been a whore, but at least she had good taste. After an hour of digging, the hole was done. She returned to the kitchen and pulled the axe from Becky's skull. Then, grabbing the body by the legs, she dragged the corpse into the backyard. Her head bounced off the doorframe and a chunk of scalp sloughed off, revealing the depth of the hack job. Mary gagged. She lined the body up with the hole, and with a good kick, rolled the corpse into the grave. It landed face down in the dirt. A spurt of blood and brain peppered the wall of the pit and a bit of Mary's shoe. Ah, hell, would you look at that? She wiped her foot in the grass. Just ain't my night. She reached for the shovel and stifled a scream. Sitting on the mound of dirt was a black cat, an oily-haired Tom with one eye. On its collar hung a name tag with Becky's address. Shoo! Shoo! She waved her hands at the cat, but the animal didn't move. It stared at her with its singular copper eye, and something in the way the animal looked at her gave Mary the creeps. There was malevolence in that one eye. Go on, get! But the cat kept staring, drilling a hole right through her until she couldn't take it anymore. She took the shovel and brought it down on the cat's head, again and again until the cat was dead. Grabbing it by the scruff of the neck, she threw it in the hole next to Becky and buried them together. Mary stuck the shovel into the dirt, dusted off her hands, and wiped the sweat from her brow. She checked her phone. If she hurried, she might still catch the final Jeopardy. She turned to head into the kitchen, but stopped, her hands clutching her mouth, a scream catching in her throat. The cat stared at her from the kitchen doorway. A light dusting of dirt and compost covered its fur. Impossible. The odds Becky owned 2 raggedy one-eyed tomcats were next to none, but there it was, sitting and staring at her. It couldn't be the same cat. Mary grabbed the shovel and uncovered the corpse. No cat. She spun around and faced the animal. Panic gripped her as she looked into the eye. She could see it now. An unnatural intelligence sat behind that singular eye. Something beyond explanation. Anger replaced fear, and she swung the shovel, and she didn't stop until she was sure the thing was dead. She wiped the tears from her eyes and threw the lifeless body into the grave and covered it with dirt. From behind her came a low meow. The cat was in the kitchen. Mary screamed. The lights next door turned on. The neighborhood dogs barked in alarm, but Mary didn't care. She charged the cat, raising the shovel above her head. She'd kill it this time, pulp the damn thing until there was nothing left. Mary cleared the doorframe, but her foot found the chunk of Becky's scalp and she slipped. Her head hit the table, snapping her neck. She landed with a thump, her face bouncing off the checkered linoleum floor. She didn't get up. The neighbors found Mary dead, the shovel still in her hand. Later, they'd find Becky's body, along with her cat, dead and curled between her arms, as if it was sleeping.
I was drunk. Not too drunk, but enough that I couldn't drive, and Bethany's party showed no signs of stopping. I would have stayed longer, but I had jazz class in the morning and needed to sleep. Who wants to be surrounded by brass instruments while nursing a hangover? I pulled the hood of my jacket up and hugged Bethany goodbye, then shuffled into the chilly midnight air. Brian, our saxophonist, waited for me at the bottom of the porch, his hair a mess on one side. He'd fallen asleep on the couch after pounding 6 shots of Jameson. I don't know if that's impressive to anyone else, but I'm a lightweight, so 6 shots seemed like a lot. "Can I walk you home?" he asked. "Sure." I walked past the cars parked along the border of Bethany's driveway, and Brian followed. "Come on, I know a shortcut." He stepped in front of me to squeeze between 2 pickups and crawled over the top of a wooden fence separating the driveway from the neighbor's apple orchard, and waited. "I'm not wandering through the orchard." "But it's a straight shot home." "How are we going to cross the ditch?" The ditch was a small gully filled with fast-moving water. The stuff was glacial runoff, which meant it was freezing year-round, but especially cold in the middle of winter. Not something I was keen on navigating while tipsy. "There's like a wooden bridge every 10 feet. Trust me, I cut through the orchard all the time." The cold stung my nose, and I knew a severe case of the sniffles was incoming. "Okay." I shrugged and climbed over after him. The sooner I was warm, the better. Dim beams of moonlight cut through the bare branches of the apple trees, illuminating our path through the orchard. We made a game of stepping on leaves as we went. "You better know where we're going." I bumped into a tree before stumbling forward and stomping on a crunchy leaf. "I've a vague idea." He smiled and stepped on a pile of leaves that failed to deliver a satisfying crunch. "Now I know why you brought me out here." "Oh yeah? Why is that?" "Jealousy. You're going to murder me." "Tired of playing second string to my mad clarinet skills," I teased. "You got me. There's only room for 1 reed instrument in first period jazz." We laughed. "But seriously, it's freezing." I zipped my jacket up and tucked my hands into my pockets. I should have worn something thicker, but this windbreaker looked cute on me, which, when attending a party, always trumps practicality. The Spanx were also a poor choice, but I thought I'd be driving home. That's a lie. I assumed someone sober would be kind enough to give a pretty girl a lift. Christ, I'm a terrible planner. The orchard sloped downwards, and somewhere below us was the ditch. Brian eased his way down the incline, occasionally slipping. I followed close behind, but lost my footing and slid to the bottom on my butt. Here, the trees were bigger and closer together, the branches entwined with each other, creating a twisting web that blocked out the moonlight, making it difficult to see. The place was dark and wild. "How much farther? I'm turning into a popsicle here."
10, 20 minutes? The ditch should be around here. I just can't hear it."
Brian drew his coat tighter around him and strode ahead. "Maybe it's frozen over?"
"Could be."
He stopped. Before us, barely visible in the dark, was the shadowy outline of the ditch. Thick blackberry bushes lined the sides.
"There."
He continued forward. stumbled, and with a shout, fell and rolled backward toward the gully, coming to a stop before the ledge. Below him, ice glittered across the frozen peaks of the river. "Close call," I said, helping him to his feet. Brian dusted himself off.
What did I trip on?
He walked back toward the pile of leaves that caused him to fall and brushed them away. Beneath the leaf litter was a large pale lump. Brian jumped backwards.
It's a body!
What? Then I saw the face. Frozen in wide-eyed horror and slashed to ribbons, the man was pale blue and naked, his arms and legs bound by rope behind his back, his torso open in a crisscross pattern. Thin wisps of steam arced from the man's open stomach. His innards lay out before him on the ground. Small crystals of frost decorated their base as they cooled the winter air.
What do we do?
He asked. We go back to Bethany's house and tell someone. I stepped over the body and climbed the hillside. Above me, something moved. I looked up. A man stood atop the hilltop, dressed in a raggedy cowboy hat and shredded jacket with tassels on the sleeves, a knife in his hand. Behind me, Brian called up to him.
Help! There's a body down here!
The man didn't move.
Excuse me, please, we need...
His eyes drifted to the knife.
Oh no. What are you two doing at this hour?
The man asked, playing with his knife, twirling the tip of the blade against his index finger.
Nothing good could come from it.
And he descended the hill toward us. You sure there's a bridge? I whispered. Brian nodded.
I'm certain of it.
And he grabbed my arm, and we ran. We followed the ditch line, looking for the bridge. The icy air burned my lungs, but I pushed through the pain and kept running. The alcohol in me made each step feel heavy. I stumbled and caught myself. I stumbled again and fell to the ground. My side stung with each breath, a sharp stabbing pain. My stomach tightened and a surge of warm liquid shot up my throat. I threw up. It burned with the taste of cinnamon whiskey and cider. Brian stopped.
You okay?
I wiped my mouth with my sleeve. Yeah, I'm all right. I looked over my shoulder. The man was gone. We heard nothing for a while. Then came a distant humming. The man walked amongst the trees at the base of the hill, a vague human shape blending into the shadows.
I see the bridge.
Brian's hands grabbed my arm and pulled me to my feet. We ran. As we approached, we could see something was wrong. Yellow caution tape hung across the entrance. Both sides of the bridge bent into the frozen water. It had collapsed. Brian ducked under the tape, and I followed, climbing down behind him. The boards were slick with frost, and the gaps between the planks were small. One slip, and we'd fall through the ice and be swept down the river.
It's not too far. I think we could jump it.
Brian helped ease me onto the last board. I listened to the rush of the water beneath the ice and pressed myself against the bridge.
You go first and I'll follow, okay?
Brian said. I nodded and repositioned myself, balancing on my heels. I jumped and landed on the other side. Unable to grip the boards, I broke through the ice and into the water. I resurfaced next to the bridge, dragged downstream by the current. I grabbed the nearest patch of blackberry vines and pulled myself out of the water. Their hooked barbs dug into my skin, sending pinpricks of fire across my body. I hung inches above the water, tangled amongst the brambles, shivering.
Hold on, I'll help you,
Brian said. Please do. These things hurt, like really bad. He hesitated for a moment, then jumped, landing in the middle of the bridge. Hooking one hand in between the wooden slats, he reached across the bridge for me.
Grab my hand!
The vines made climbing difficult. Their thorns gripped my skin and clothing. The harder I fought against them, the more entangled I became. I can't make it, I said.
Hold on!
Brian scooted closer to the edge and tested the nearest patch of vines with his foot. He stepped onto them and extended his hand to me.
Just a little farther.
In the distance, the man came humming his song. He stepped over the caution tape and rubbed a hand over the stubble on his chin as he studied the situation.
What a mess. What a mess.
He gauged the distance, stepped back, then jumped, landing at the top of the bridge. He spun around and kicked dirt down on us.
No, sir. Nothing good can come from being out this late at all.
His hand dipped into his pocket and removed the knife. The blade flicked open, and the man bent down and ran the edge of the knife along Brian's forehead. A thick maroon line trailed behind it. He drug it across in the opposite direction, then back again. Brian whimpered, but held onto the bridge tight. The man sat back on his haunches, admiring his work and digging the tip of the knife into his chin. His eyes flicked over to me. It was my turn. He reached down and pulled my hood back and grabbed my hair. I pulled away, digging myself deeper into the blackberry bushes. The thorns jabbed and cut my face. The hand gripped my hair tighter and yanked me back, but I tried to dig in again, and he yanked me back out. A dull, hard object struck my head, and a warm spot grew across my scalp. The object struck again, jarring my chin into my chest. My vision blurred. I looked over at Brian, and he mouthed,
I'm sorry.
"It's okay," I said. The man brought the butt of the knife down on me. My vision flashed white. At my side, Brian yelled. He launched himself off the bridge, grabbing the man by his arm, and together they tumbled into the water, disappearing under the ice, pulled downstream by the current. I hung from the blackberry bushes. The pain of the thorns was now a dull throb. Below me, the water swirled and pulsed.
The house was old, but pleasant. A classic 2-story suburban home, complete with a wraparound porch, built somewhere between the 50s and the 60s. A bit of a fixer-upper, but Katie didn't mind. How could she? Fresh from high school and starting college in the fall, she was lucky to find a decent place for $300 a month, including water and power. She wiped the sweat from her face and frowned at the pit stains forming on her pink shirt. "Why you picked the middle of a heat wave to move, I have no idea," said Leanne, returning from the house. Katie pulled a water bottle from her trunk and tossed it to her. She caught it, then leaned against the back door and chugged the entire bottle. "You're gonna make yourself sick," Katie said, pulling a box of books out from the trunk. "Uh-huh." Leanne tossed the empty bottle into the car and grabbed a box from the back seat. "Let's wrap this up. You owe me a burger and a shake. I'm not doing this for charity." "Sure, after I shower and change." "Nuh-uh. If I can't get cleaned up, then you can't. We stink in solidarity." "Fair enough." They entered the kitchen through the back door. Sitting at the table, watching them move while he ate his oatmeal, was Mr. Porter, the owner of the house. He lived in the downstairs section and rented out the second floor. "You don't have a dolly, do you? We've got a hope chest to move and it's pretty heavy," Katie asked him. He took a bite of oatmeal and chewed, looking both girls up and down. They waited in silence for a long time before he said, "Out back by the shed. Help yourself." "Thank you." Katie nudged Leanne, and the two ran up the staircase. "Oh my God, he's so creepy," Leanne whispered, closing the bedroom door with her foot and setting her box on Katie's bed. "And you're living with him." "He's a harmless old man. He's just awkward." Katie placed her box on the floor and stretched. "You'd be too if you lived alone. From what I'm told, he never leaves the house. I don't like how he stared at us. He leers. He's a leerer." "He's fine. How about that burger? I can't take this heat any longer. We can move the chest when it's cooler out." Katie wrapped her hair into a ponytail, then opened the door. She jumped in alarm. Mr. Porter stood in front of the doorway. "You'll be needing these," he said, holding a set of keys. "The big ones for the garage, small ones for the back door." He handed her the keys, letting his fingers rest in her palm longer than she was comfortable with. She pulled her hand back. "Thank you, Mr. Porter." He smiled and left. The girls watched him descend the stairs, and for the first time, they noticed the metal leg brace on his left leg. With every step, the joints rubbed together, producing a sharp metal scraping sound. "Creepy," Leanne said. "A little," Katie smiled nervously. They waited until he was downstairs, in his part of the house, before they left for the diner. When they returned, the sun was setting, but the day's heat remained. They still needed to move the hope chest, but Katie wasn't keen on the idea. Her stomach was full and the thing was heavy. She also wanted a shower, but Leanne wouldn't be here to help tomorrow, and she didn't want to leave it outside all night. It was a nice chest. They found the dolly leaning against the back of the shed, tangled in cobwebs and grass. Gross. This looks like more trouble than it's worth, Katie said. She wasn't a fan of spiders. Are you kidding? That chest is huge. Leanne grabbed the handle, ignoring the cobwebs. She wrenched it back and forth until she ripped it free from the weeds, then gave it a quick brush down. There, good as new. Katie had to admit that Leanne was right. Once they loaded the chest onto the dolly, moving it up the stairs and into the closet was easy, despite its weight and size. Afterwards, Leanne said, "Hey, I'm gonna bounce. I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" She was already halfway out the bedroom door. "Yeah, sounds good," Katie said, and gave her a hug. She watched her leave down the stairs, then went to find the box with her towels. Finally, she'd get that shower. Having cleaned up and feeling refreshed, she eyed the boxes littering her room. Maybe she'd unpack a few before bed? Nah, she'd deal with organizing the rest tomorrow. After all, school didn't start for 3 more days. Plenty of time to finish the move. Katie checked the time on her phone. 9:30, bedtime. She plunged it into the wall charger, set it on the nightstand, and then crawled into bed. She struggled to fall asleep, tossing and turning, unable to get comfortable. The silence was too much. She wasn't used to living in a place so quiet. Before she moved to the suburbs, she lived downtown with her folks in an apartment above several small shops, and every night she'd fall asleep to the sounds of the city. She missed the noise. Katie laid on her back, eyes closed, attempting to fall asleep, when the door to her bedroom slowly opened. There was a pause. Then she heard the creak of old floorboards and the metallic groan of Mr. Porter's leg brace. He was in her room, her breath caught in her throat. Afraid to move or open her eyes, she listened to his faint, ragged breathing and the sound of metal against metal as he shuffled further into her room. What did he want? Why was he in her room? She inhaled through her nose and, summoning her courage, she opened her eyes and sat straight up in her bed. "Who's there?" she said. Her voice wavered a little. Nothing. The room was empty. She sat in the darkness, squinting and scanning, looking for something, anything. Was her mind playing tricks on her? Then her heart jumped. She saw the outline of a man standing in her closet. She screamed, reached for the light on her nightstand, and turned it on. When she looked back, the closet was empty. Katie jumped out of her bed and ran to her closet, flinging her hanging clothes aside. But no one was there, just clothes, a couple of unopened boxes, and her hope chest. The chest, she thought, and a sickening feeling overcame her. She pulled the hope chest forward and lifted the lid. Inside was nothing, except a bunch of blankets and random junk. "Impossible! I saw him," she said to herself. The adrenaline faded, and she dropped to her knees. Her lips trembled, and she cried. It was the middle of the night when Leanne opened her door to see Katie, red-eyed and barefoot, standing on her front steps. "Are you absolutely sure it was him?" she asked, handing Katie a cup of tea. The two sat in Leanne's bedroom, a sleeping bag laid out on the floor. "It was his leg brace. I'd know that awful sound anywhere." "Yeah, I can't go back there," said Katie, pulling the mouth of the sleeping bag around her. "Of course not. You can stay here until you find a new place, and when you're ready to go back, I'll go with you." "Are you sure?" "Of course. You kidding?" "Thanks." The next day, the heat wave hit triple digits, a record setter. The two girls spent the day staying cool in a local coffee shop, bumming the Wi-Fi and looking through local listings for apartments and houses with an extra room to rent. After a couple of days of searching, they found Katie an apartment closer to town, pricier than the Porter house, but not quite outside her range. "Whatever, I'll make this work," she thought, and signed the lease. She'd move in immediately. It was late afternoon when the two drove up the gravel driveway of the Porter house, a small trailer on loan from her new landlord hooked to the back of Leanne's car. "You just let me do the talking, okay, honey?" she said. Katie nodded, glad her friend was taking the lead. She dreaded the thought of facing Mr. Porter again. They walked around the back of the house and entered through the kitchen. The first thing they noticed was the air conditioning was off and the place was sweltering, an easy 10 degrees warmer than the outside. Mr. Porter was nowhere to be found. "Maybe he left?" Katie suggested. "If he's smart, he would have. Let's grab your stuff and go," Leanne said, climbing the staircase. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and she wiped it away with her shirt sleeve. This place is a sauna. When they opened the door to the bedroom, the strong, sweet, sickly smell of decay hit them. Leanne ran to the window and threw it open, hanging halfway out, gagging. "What is that?" Katie didn't answer. She still stood in the doorway, frozen by a growing suspicion. She knew that smell. Once, when she was a child, a car hit a raccoon outside her parents' apartment. It laid there for days, baking in the heat. The smell was unforgettable. "The closet," she said. "What?" "He's still in there." And she ran to the closet, throwing out clothes and boxes, their contents spilling into the middle of her room. Leanne watched her friend and realized what she meant. Her hands shot to her mouth. "Oh my God!" The closet was empty, except for the hope chest. She didn't understand. The smell was definitely coming from inside the closet. "He's in here. He has to be." Then she remembered. That night she moved the hope chest. Grabbing the handles, she dragged it into her room, revealing a thin seam cut across several of the floorboards, warped and wet with sweat, a removable panel in the center of her closet. Katie's hands clawed at the hidden door. Her fingers found purchase, and she yanked the square free. A plume of steam struck her face, the stench overpowering, and she felt her stomach lurch. From the window, Leanne screamed. Laying inside a hidden crawlspace was Mr. Porter, his hands hanging in the air, fingers curved like claws, the nails missing. Katie's whole body trembled in silent horror. She turned the panel over. Deep grooves where he tried to claw his way out ran the length of the wooden square. The tremors grew stronger. She dropped the panel and stumbled backwards onto the bed. Her voice wavered, then gave way to a scream.
I parked in the driveway of my childhood home. Once a beautiful white house was now an ugly, warm gray. Large strips of paint peeled off the siding and decorative shutters missing from broken windows. This was no longer the idyllic country home I remembered. Ma would be heartbroken, I thought, and wondered what kind of people lived here and how they could let the place go. Did I even want to know? My eyes drifted from the house to the envelope in my passenger seat, the reason for this visit. The letter was from my brother. First I've heard from him in years. Apparently my dad was on his way out any day now, and the old man wanted to see me, make amends for how things went down between him and my mom. She left him when I was 10, took me with her. My dad kept my younger brother, Dustin. I figure something big must have happened between them because she refused to give me a reason she'd up and RUNOFT. Wouldn't even tell me on her deathbed. Didn't want my brother or father to know she kicked the big one either. I've always felt bad about that. If I knew how to contact them, I would have. Lord knows how they found me. I considered turning around and driving home. Forget the whole thing, grab some fast food and watch some TV. I'll pour a Diet Coke out for the old man from the comfort of my couch. No, it's like Ma used to say, you shouldn't judge a person before you know their situation. My brother might be too busy caring for our sick father to tend to the house. Hell, I could relate. Looking after Ma these last few years, left me little time for anything else. I wasn't exactly excited about this reunion, so maybe I was looking for an excuse to get out of here. I didn't know these people from Adam, but I knew my ma and she probably had good reason to leave. Still, I was here, and I had questions that needed answers. I opened my glove box, pulled out the small pocket knife I kept hidden inside, clipped it to my belt, turned the ignition off, and climbed out of the car. The air was cool and damp, filled with the faint smell of mildew. What little sun that broke through the shade of the trees highlighted the clumps of swarming gnats. Something struck the side of my head, hard. I swatted it to the ground, then looked. A cockroach lay on its back, legs and antennae waving at me. I crunched it beneath my shoe. I hate cockroaches. Wasn't no need for that, came a voice from the house. Descending the steps towards me was a young man in a hoodie, my little brother. We had the same nose, the same pinched brow. However, he lacked some of my better features. He was thin, and his pale skin looked bluish in spots, sickly. "Dustin?" I held out my hand, but he brushed it aside and hugged me, his elbows digging into my ribs. The kid was all bone and sharp angles. Strong, too. Yeah, it's great to see you, too." I pulled away. "So this is the old homestead, huh? I barely remember it. This is it. Still standing after all these years. Come in. I've ordered out." I followed him into the house. Entryway was dark, dusty, and smelled of dry rot. Wood furniture lined the walls, cracked from years of neglect. Candles led the way to the dining room at the end of the hall. "Power out?" "Oh no, nothing like that. We like to keep things dark. We prefer it." "That so?" I fidgeted with the knife clipped to my belt. "Is Dad joining us?" "Please sit," Dustin said, gesturing to a small dining table. Candles decorated its center. Their faint light illuminated the patches of dark fungus that spotted the deteriorating tabletop. Boxes of Chinese food sat at the opposite end, the smell of takeout mixed with stale air. "I remember you liked Chinese food." Dustin looked down as if trying to concentrate on a far-off thought. "You used to order General Tso's with broccoli and fried rice." He beamed. Pleased he remembered my order and sat at the table. "Yeah, I haven't had it in a while. Trying to watch the weight." His smile fell. "Oh," he said. "When did you say Dad was joining us?" "Here." He set two of the white boxes in front of me. "Dig in, it's good." He grabbed a box of rice and shoveled the food into his mouth, making exaggerated yummy noises. I picked through chunks of chicken and broccoli. The stuff looked all right until legs emerged from the sauce and fumbled for my chopsticks. A cockroach, fat from gorging on meat and vegetables, pulled itself onto my utensil. My stomach heaved. I jumped to my feet, threw the chopsticks on the ground, then brought my foot down, popping the roach in a meaty burst of thick red slime. "I told you, wasn't no need for that," Dustin yelled. He was out of his chair getting in my face. I could smell his breath, bad like compost. "Listen, I'm sorry, it's just this is a lot for me. I really just want to see Dad." He composed himself. "Yeah, okay. I guess it's about time you seen him." Dustin led me down a candle-lined hallway framed with family photos decorating stained, rotten walls. I gripped my knife. The kid scared me. This house scared me. I wanted to leave, but I needed to see Dad and get an idea of his condition. We stopped outside a door. "Here." He opened it, releasing trapped air that stunk of earth and compost. The candles in the hall illuminated the room well enough to see, and I went in. My old man sat in a rocking chair at the back, a dried husk, paper-thin skin stretched across the bone. He stared at me with eyeless sockets, not quite empty. Deep within them, things moved, their hard bodies reflecting bits of light. Beneath his denim jacket, his button-down shirt throbbed with life, and an uneasiness gripped me. I could hear their scraping and scuttling, and the air caught in my throat. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I went to him and ripped his shirt open. Hundreds of cockroaches poured onto the floor. The insects crawled over my feet and up my pant legs. I swatted and kicked them, stomping any that came near me. Dad's body went and dried up on him. Needs a new one, Dustin said from the doorway. Thought you'd be a good fit. His thin arms wrapped around me and he squeezed. He just needs to find a hole. The cockroaches swarmed us. They landed on my face, their antennas dancing on my skin. I felt a searing pain in my ear. They ate, chewing a hole big enough to fit their bodies inside my ear canal. I cried out, and a roach flew into my mouth. I crunched it between my teeth. Fluids coated my tongue with the taste of iron. They crawled beneath my pants leg, biting into the flesh of my calf while others worked their way to more tender areas. I kicked, shaking them loose, and brought my foot down on Dustin's. He yelped and let go. I elbowed him in the nose, pulled the knife from my belt and flicked it open. Dustin lunged, and I buried the tip in his stomach. He looked surprised. I pulled the blade across, opening both him and his hoodie. Cockroaches poured from the wound. His body deflated. Eyeballs fell from their sockets, replaced by a cascade of roaches fighting to escape his shriveling face. I pushed through the mass of cockroaches that were once Dustin and ran into the hallway, stumbling over the candles. Behind me, I heard the buzz of insects and the crackle of flames. The wallpaper was catching. Escaping the house, I closed the front door and cleared the stairs in 2 strides. Something heavy struck the door and shook the frame. The doorknob jiggled and fell, and cockroaches spilled from the hole. I ran to my car and crawled inside as the mass of roaches took flight. Insects landed on the hood, windshield, and roof. I hit the wipers. They rolled over the bugs, severing legs and heads, their guts smeared across the glass. With my foot on the gas, I exited the driveway and onto the road. I didn't stop. Behind me, the cloud of roaches became a swirling blot in the sky, then a dot, a speck, and then they were gone. I leaned back in my seat and exhaled. My hands gripped the steering wheel and I laughed. I was alive.
This ain't your night, I said to myself. My drunk was wearing off, the bars were closed, and I wasn't happy about it. Why wasn't I eating greasy diner food at Peggy's, or finishing the 6-pack in my fridge? I should be. Instead, I sat in a cramped apartment, surrounded by people I didn't know, and I was being proselytized to by a man calling himself Zever82. What a waste of a good buzz. My alarm bell should have gone off when the Caucasian girl at the bar introduced herself as Tomiko Hardcore. But I rolled with it. I was plenty drunk, so who cared about her weird name? This was my chance to get laid. I was wrong. Shuka, Shuka, the comets a-comin', their leader Zever82 sang as he danced inside the circle of chairs. A wild, flame-haired idiot wrapped in a bedsheet he called a toga. Shuka, Shuka, the group chanted and clapped. What did I get myself into? Tomiko Hardcore sat next to me, looking happier than a pig in shit. She elbowed me, nodded her head, and motioned for me to clap. I joined in, just not with the same enthusiasm. That was a mistake. Zever82 noticed, and smiling like an idiot, wiggled and jiggled his way over to me. I see you, brother. One more for the convent. The comets are coming, you see. He thrust and gyrated his pelvis too close to my face. The group continued to chant, Shuka, Shuka. Those eggheads in Washington got it all wrong, you see. I got the real scoop, yes, sir, from the capital G.O.D. himself. That burning ball of gas will make a history of us. End of the line. Shuka, Shuka, they chanted. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I said, assuming he meant this week's hottest news story. A meteor would pass the Earth, closer than any meteor since the dinosaurs. Nothing was supposed to happen besides a fancy light show. The media said it would pass us by. No, sir, God sent visions right to my brain. He showed me death, destruction, folks-eating folks, Jimmy Buffett. He shook his head. His curly red hair whipped me in the face. It stunk. What's your name? Billy. He made a big X with his arms. I mean your social media, your username, your handle, you get me? Super cool dude, man, I lied. My real username wasn't much better, to be honest. That's hot, Tomiko Hardcore slurred in her California accent, so it sounded like hot. She leaned against me and nuzzled my cheek. We don't use our real names just in case they're listening in, Zever82 said. Who? I asked. Whoever's following me. He danced into the center of the circle. That's right, they've been following me, maybe even you too. Zever82 pointed at his cult, who clapped along. They know we got the juice, God's juice, the holy water that'll save us from the evils being visited on our world. He taught me how to mix it up. Shit, I need to get out of here. Meteor-themed cults and magic juice never mix. I tried to stand, but Tomiko Hardcore squirmed away onto my lap, wiggling back and forth while she clapped and chanted. Shuka shuka. Sakura Fan 776 has been slaving away all day, so let's make her feel appreciated, Zever82 said. You show these good people what you got for 'em, honey. From the bathroom came a heroin-thin girl carrying a large cooking pot, filled with what looked like watered-down radiator fluid. She set it on a coffee table covered in a cheap plastic sheet that read Happy Birthday. The cult members cheered and whistled. Sakura Fan 776 gave a curtsy. Thank you, darling, Zever82 said, blowing the girl a kiss. Now, pass out the party favors. She reached into her sweatpants and produced a handful of small Ziploc baggies. Each one contained a pastel green pill. The cult members stiffened with excitement. Their eyes locked onto the bags hanging from the frail girl's hands, and licking their lips, they waited with jittery patience. She walked behind the circle of chairs, passing a baggie to each member. Tomiko Hardcore grabbed two. The girl handed Zever82 his bag, then sat down behind him. She was salivating. He removed the pill and held it high in the air. The cult members followed. When that meteor visits its evil self upon us, we won't be cowering in fear. No, sir, he said. No, sir, the cult repeated. That's right. We gonna be celebrating and partying and flipping the big old ball of gas, the middle one. Why? 'Cause we got the juice, they shouted. And upon hearing that, Zever82 laid the pill on his tongue, held it in for a minute to show the crowd, and then swallowed. The others did the same. Tomiko Hardcore popped one into her mouth. She laid the second pill on her tongue, then kissed it into my mouth. The thing tasted like dirt. I pulled away, but she grabbed the sides of my head and held the kiss until she was sure I swallowed. This was bad. Someone put Weezer on the record player, and suddenly Zever82 stood spread-eagled, his bedsheet at his feet. The crowd went nuts, cheers of adoration and awe for his nude form. A few of the male members averted their eyes. I didn't blame them. I wasn't keen on the sudden appearance of Zever82's little hoggy either. Soon everyone was naked and dancing. Tomiko Hardcore lay on the floor, fighting to escape the shirt around her head, while Sakura Fan 776 loaded Dixie cups with magic juice. The pill hit hard. Patterns of color decorated the room and pulsed to the beat of the music. I needed to escape, before they passed out whatever Zever82 and Sakura Fan 776 put into those cups. My legs moved like jelly, and each step towards the door brought me closer to the ground until I was on my knees, crawling. Around me, people danced, laughed, and grabbed at imaginary things in front of their faces. Through a haze of colors, I found the door, and, pulling myself to my feet, I tried the handle, but it didn't move. Locked. Someone jerked me backwards. I fell, and the back of my head hit the floor. Above me stood Zever82 and his cult, still naked. The view wasn't appealing. Where you going? It ain't safe out there. Like I said, I seen the future. I know the know. I grok the true. You feel me? He bent over me. You know, you ain't looking too copacetic. No, sir. The music stopped. Tomiko Hardcore, you get your pretty little butt over here, he said. She came, still fighting to get the shirt off. What you want? She asked, removing the shirt with the help from Zever82. You brought a non-believer into our midst, a trickster. Why, I bet he's here for the juice, wants it for himself. She looked me over, then shook her head. No, I don't think so. He rubbed her shoulders and nodded. Yeah, he said, looking sympathetic. Sakura fan 776 reappeared with something in her hands. She positioned herself behind Tomoko Hardcore with a big smile on her face. The baseball bat connected with the back of Tomoko Hardcore's head. There was the crack of wood against bone, then a second, and a third. One of her eyes popped out and she dropped to the floor, folded up on herself. Dead. The violence startled the cult. Well, shit, said someone in the back. I agreed. Now you see, there are serpents everywhere. Poor sweet Tomoko Hardcore was too innocent. She didn't heed the words, didn't read the signs, and allowed a wolf into our flock. She needed to be punished. No room in God's kingdom for the naive and weak. Why, Sakura fan 776 gave her a mercy killing. Better this way. We look after our flock, even after they're led astray. Blood filled the bowl-shaped dent in Tomoko Hardcore's head, a kaleidoscope of dancing reds and maroons. The pattern spilled onto the floor, crawling towards me, and I tried to scoot away, but two cult members held me firm. You're nuts, man. Yeah, you keep talking. Keep speaking your lies, but we know. Zever82 grabbed the bat from Sakura fan 776. He pointed to the crowd. Now, I told you what I seen in my visions. People weren't people, they were mean green monsters feeding on each other. Fire and brimstone and all hell breaking loose, with demons ruling in man's place. He pointed the bat at me. These snakes and liars want the world to go to shit. They want mankind circling the drain. They're looking forward to it. He was riling them up good. The crowd looked from him to me and back again, nodding along, drinking in his gospel. One scrawny fella stepped up and kicked me in the side. Yeah, that's what you get. He nodded at Zever82, then kicked me again. Soon the other members joined in, spitting, kicking, and cursing. People shoved each other to get a kick in. Seemed like they were having fun. I wasn't. I was in a lot of pain, especially in the nether parts. They gave my boys a lot of love. Pick him up! Zever82 yelled. Hands pulled me to my feet, pinning me to the door. Zever82 tapped my chin with the tip of the baseball bat. It was cold and wet from Tomoko Hardcore's blood. You're lucky, son. We're merciful people, and we'll see you off right. He rolled the bat up my cheek to my temple. We're gonna spare you, treat you like one of our own. You won't be joining us in heaven with the big G, but you'll be in whatever middle place they got. You and Tomoko Hardcore. Someone put Weezer back on the record player, and Zever82 raised the bat above his head. Behind him, the cult went wild, whooping and hollering, calling for my blood. Real medieval-type shit. I expected my life to flash before my eyes. Instead, all I could think about was one of Peggy's greasy cheeseburgers. Is that sad? It feels a little sad. He squared up, tapping the bat against my skull with a couple of test swings. He pulled back, but before he could hit the home run, there was a sound, like someone dropped a cartoon bomb. A strange look came over Zever82, like he received some bad, but funny news. Time's up! He dropped the bat and ran for the juice cups. He didn't make it. There came an explosion, and the apartment filled with bright green light. I heard the windows break. A cloud of dust lifted me off the ground and spun me through the air until my head hit something hard. Then darkness. When I came to, everyone was dead. Their bodies sprawled across the apartment, peppered with chunks of broken glass and bent at all kinds of angles. The cooking pot filled with Zever82's magic juice lay on its side, surrounded by half-empty Dixie cups. Their precious liquid puddled on the floor and dripped from the walls. I rubbed my eyes, glad the drug's effects were wearing off, and got to my feet. I walked to the window. Everything hurt. probably because of the beatings and whatever happened at the end there. Either way, I was in pain. I couldn't see much. A heavy layer of green dust and mist obscured the world. Above me, thunder rumbled in rolling, equally green storm clouds. Well, I'll be damned. I left the apartment, but it wasn't any better on the ground. I stood on the stoop of the apartment complex and stared at the hazy green world of drooping buildings, upturned cars, and random fires. Dust swirled around my face, so I pulled my shirt over my nose. This couldn't be good for my lungs. I thought about everything Zebber 82 preached, and I whistled. Man, I bet on the wrong horse. The city was empty. I wandered down familiar sidewalks towards the bar where I met Tomiko Hardcore earlier that night. We walk-stumbled from there to her apartment, so my car should still be out back. Hopefully sitting on all four tires. Walking down the empty streets, I looked for signs other people had survived the impact. Occasionally I'd see an empty pile of clothes or a pair of shoes hanging from a window, but nothing more than that. I started thinking that maybe I was the sole survivor, the last man on Earth. Wouldn't that be the pits? I'd never get laid. I made my way to an intersection, and squinting through the thick green fog, I saw I was somewhere on 4th and Main. Might have been 5th and Main, but it didn't matter. The important thing was Peggy's Diner was off 2nd and Main. I forgot about my car and headed towards Peggy's. A block away, I heard the faint sound of music. Jimmy Buffett's It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. I quickened my pace and followed the sound. To my joy and surprise, the music was coming from the diner. Well, ain't I the luckiest SOB to survive the apocalypse? I threw open the double doors and waltzed in. The smell of fry oil and grease greeted me like an old friend. 3 men sat at the counter, their backs to me. The sound of them shoveling food into their mouths competed with the music. Hell of a night, I said, sitting next to them. They stopped eating and looked at me. I looked back at them. Oh, shit. Their faces were green, the same color as the clouds and dust. Their skin bubbled and puckered like it was alive. The closest man slurped a sinewy piece of meat that hung from his mouth. My eyes drifted to what they were eating. On their plates sat fried, baked, and barbecued bits of hand, feet, ears, all kinds of meat, all of which were obviously human. We got a live one! I looked up. The waitress stood in the kitchen doorway, a look of joy on her wrinkled green face. The men at the counter lunged at me, grabbing and pulling. They slammed me down on the counter and held me there. Oh, honey, thank the Lord, the waitress said. She ran her fingers over my cheek before she popped them into her mouth and sucked on them. The men pushed and shoved each other, fighting to lick my arms and face, grunting like contented pigs. The cook came stomping through the kitchen doors, having the same green skin as the others. Quit that, he said, and slapped the men with his spatula. They shuffled back to their pile of meat, and soon they were fighting with each other, snapping and snarling over the last bit of foot. You goddamn bunch of animals, the cook said. He turned his attention back to me and grabbed my face, turning it side to side. He'll cook up nice, he said to the waitress. She made a noise like an excited schoolgirl. Oh, honey, sweetie, you came just in time. We were so hungry, you can't imagine. Sorry, kid, the cook said. He jerked my head back, stretching out my neck. From the pocket of his apron, he pulled a knife. I'm no killer, but I'll make it quick. Cook you up right, too. You can't imagine the hunger, the waitress said again. She was drooling so much the front of her shirt was wet. Yeah, it's unbearable, this hunger. But we ain't animals. I'll make a proper meal of you. Any last words? The waitress asked, wiping away the slobber with her forearm. I wanted this to be good. Shit, this was a lot of pressure. Maybe I could get them to change their minds. They seemed like reasonable cannibals. I mean, as reasonable as cannibals could be, I suppose. Thoughts flooded my mind. I couldn't focus. Then, as loud as I could, I spoke my last act of defiance. Nothing is certain but death and taxes! The two exchanged confused looks. From down the counter came several equally confused grunts. I mean, yeah, I suppose that's true, said the cook. Listen, can I have a do-over? Tonight's been a series of poor decisions, just one after another. Especially this last one.
Sorry, kid. I guess it just ain't your night.
And the cook slid the knife across my throat.
Marvin unloaded the dead dog from the passenger seat of his V8 Ford, wrapped in a towel, so it wouldn't shed on the leather interior. He laid the body on the workbench in the garage and unwrapped the towel to reveal his prize. His favorite breed, a dachshund. Imagine his joy when his neighbors returned home one day with 2 of them. He failed to nail both dogs, but one was better than none. And there was always the next time, of course. He would have to wait. The weeks following the successful hunt were risky. The neighborhood would be on edge, usually blame the disappearance on a wild animal, and shoot the first coyote or raccoon that they saw. Then things would settle down. It never failed. Still, the botched snatch and grab bothered him. In his prime, it wouldn't have been a problem. He'd bring home 3 or 4 animals a night. But he was old and now with a bad back. Mistakes were more common. He checked his watch. 10 till 6. 1 minute behind. Marvin left the garage and headed upstairs to his bedroom. He changed into his hobby clothes, black slacks with suspenders, over a pressed white shirt and a small black bow tie. He wanted to look nice for his beauties. For the past 30 years, Marvin stuck to his routine. With the dedication of a priest, his art was a religious experience. It was how he communed with God, how he understood the magic of creation and his purpose as an artist. Marvin adjusted his bow tie and left his room. 30 years of artistry watched in silent reverence as he descended the staircase. A zoological history of the neighborhood pets. German Shepherds, Corgis, Rottweilers, and Dobermans displayed with grace and beauty. They no longer needed to eat, bark, or Marvin shuddered at the thought. Poop. Such an undignified behavior. The only attention they required was an occasional dusting. He thought back on the years that he'd spent mastering his craft. There were bumps and missteps along the way, and some animals went to waste in the name of progress. But this gallery showcased his dedication, a tribute to his perfection. And now he would add a dachshund. He always wanted a dachshund. He entered the garage and closed the door behind him. The 3 plastic tubs stacked on a bowed shelf above the door shuttered. Scribbled in Sharpie on the sides were the words keepsakes, notes and papers, and trophies, mementos of his youth. He'd meant to take care of those tubs years ago. Now they were too heavy, and he didn't trust his legs on a ladder. He would have to wait until the shelf collapsed. Until then, he'd be wary. Marvin circled the Ford to his workbench and opened the window above it. The summer breeze carried the smell of fried chicken from some nearby restaurant into the garage. He checked his watch. 7:31. He took the timer from above his workbench and set it for 2 hours and 29 minutes. Then laid it next to the tray of knives and shears. Everything he'd need for the skinning process. Marvin selected a small knife from the tray and slid the blade up the dog's stomach, carefully, not to puncture the organs. From there, he lifted the flap and cut along the edge. His knife moved in short, quick slices that separated the connective tissue from the muscle and pelt. While he didn't enjoy the scent of the raw meat mixed with fried chicken, he found it comforting. 9:59 came, and the timer beeped. Marvin exhaled, rubbed the soreness from his eyes, and admired his progress. He'd accomplished little with the allotted time, but he didn't mind. He wanted to savor this piece. Marvin wrapped the dog in its towel and carried it to the commercial freezer at the back of the garage. He opened the lid and laid the body across a pile of frozen dogs. Previous victims he had yet to find time to discard. "Such a good boy," he said as he ran his hand over the dog's toweled head, then closed the lid. He cleaned his workspace, shut off the light, and went to bed. Marvin dreamed as he laid in his bed. His bedroom was cold, illuminated by blue light that was neither lamplit nor moonlit, but an unnatural glow that hung in the air like a mist. At the base of the bed, a dachshund. He ignored the dog and rolled over onto his side, but the box became faster, now a shrill yapping. Marvin lurched upright and threw his pillow at the dog. "Shut up!" He missed. The dog barked. Marvin jumped out of his bed and grabbed for the dog, but the dachshund danced out of reach. It barked again. Marvin's temper surged. He kicked at the dog, swung his fist, but he was too slow. He cast his age. If only he were younger, he'd catch and strangle the life out of the mutt. The barks grew louder, more insistent. They stung his ears. Then the dog opened his mouth, and out came a sound of metal crashing to the ground. Marvin jerked awake. He sat up in his bed, wiped the sweat from his face, and then ran his hand through his hair. A nightmare. He checked his watch. 4:36. Still morning. Downstairs, a dog barked. He wrapped himself in his bathrobe and crawled out of bed. He opened the bedroom door and peered into the hallway. Thin beams of moonlight lit the landing and the staircase. It was empty. He eased himself out of the bedroom and descended the stairs. From within the gloom of the room below, he could see the glass eyes of the taxidermy dogs reflect the pale light. To him, they looked like a pack of hungry animals, and for a moment he imagined the culprit hiding amongst the stuffed bodies, waiting to maul him. These thoughts were new to him and had come easily in the dark. His art had never frightened him before. He didn't like it. His eyes strayed from the pets for a moment and stopped at the garage door. It was open from the inside. he heard a bark. "I've got you!" Marvin stepped into the garage and closed the door behind him. The tubs trembled. He didn't notice. He could hear the staccato click of the sprinklers and smell the fresh, wet grass. Outside the open window, Marvin grunted. Must be how the mud got in. The workbench below the window, left clean and organized, now was cluttered with debris. From the shelf above his work area, a jug of optimaling set on its side, dripping into the swollen foam sheets strewn across the tabletop. At the base of the workbench lay the tool tray, shears and knives soaked in formaldehyde among shards of shattered bottle. An explosion of alum covered the V8 like a thin layer of snow. The dogs have been busy. His forehead was wrinkled, and he'd chew on the side of his tongue. The dog might still be in the garage, and if it was a decent size, there was little he could do to defend himself. He'd need a weapon. With his eyes focused on the room and a hand on the hood of the car, he circled the Ford to where his tools lay scattered. Somewhere a bucket fell. He jumped and pressed himself against the grill. The boxes and shelving units transformed inkblots before him, and he saw a silhouette of the dog in each one. Marvin's lips quivered. Sweat cooled his brow. He was frightened. Why? He'd taken many dogs. What changed? The answer came to him. Control. He'd always had control. He understood his dogs and when and where to take them. Without his traps, knives, and syringes, he was nothing. A pitiful old man. No, he told himself. You're not too old. Not yet. He swallowed hard, choking down the lump in his throat. His eyes were trained on the garage. Marvin reached a shaky hand towards the tools. His fingers grazed over the shears and the scalpels, careful to avoid the shards of glass, until he settled on the buck knife. A cold huff of air chilled Marvin's hand. He looked up. The dark amber eyes of his unfinished dachshund glared back. The dog's mouth was hovered over his hand. Its tongue flicked between its teeth. Ropes of saliva slapped the ground. Marvin wasn't aware of the tremors in his body. Water vapor drifted into the slender strands of crisp pelt draped over the dog's sleek, muscular body. The other dogs that Marvin stored in his freezer stood behind the dachshund. Skinless, blind monsters, composed of frozen muscle, fat, bone, an exhale of air squeezed between his lips in a high-pitched whine. Marvin's heart hammered in his chest. Instinct took over. He thrust the knife into the neck of the dachshund. The tip bounced off the frozen cords of muscle. The dog lunged. Teeth crunched down on his hand. He cried out and dropped his knife. The dachshund whipped its head around side to side. Its mouth locked on the crippled hand. Teeth ripped the skin, clipped the bones, and opened arteries. Blood and adrenaline pumped. Marvin pulled his hand from the dog's mouth and clutched the ruined appendage to his chest. He was on his feet, running for the garage door, but the dogs were on him. Their frozen teeth sank into his thigh, his calf, and rump. Nerves fired their electric crackle, snapped across his body. Marvin slammed into the door. The shelf above gave way, and the tubs collapsed. Their lids were open, showering him with keepsakes and memories of bygone years. He struck the ground, and his hips shattered beneath the weight of his youth. The back of his neck met the Ford's hubcap. There was no pain. The dogs watched to see if Marvin would move. When he didn't, the dachshund pounced and tore into Marvin's stomach. The rest of the pack joined in, burying their snouts in the old man's intestines, gobbling the ropes of pink meat. A large Rottweiler pushed his way in the front of the pack. Stuck to its side was a freezer-burned Pomeranian that growled and snapped at the air. The Rottweiler forced his enormous head beneath Marvin's ribcage. Its jaws crunched through the cartilage and bone. There was a pop. Then Marvin couldn't breathe. With a quick shake of its head, the dog tore the left lung from Marvin's chest, swallowing it with a wet chomp. Through blurry eyes, he looked at the memorabilia surrounding him and smiled. He coughed and cleared his throat of enough blood to manage a whisper. If I were in my prime, he died before he could finish the sentence. The dogs were too busy enjoying their meal to hear him.
I'm an exterminator of the weird. Like the really weird. Have you ever exorcised the ghost of 100 dead mosquitoes? Trapped a dogman with a couple of whoppers and an apple crate? Or staked a pair of vampiric tennis shoes? I have. But you won't see my name celebrated in the papers. My job is the most underappreciated of underappreciated jobs. Now, I can say that with confidence. My cousin shovels cow shit for a living. These monsters, or weirdos, as I like to call them, live along our highways, around open spaces, and in small towns, feeding on the people society ignores. Which is why I'm currently sitting in my truck at the edge of a desert, freezing my butt off. I'm on the trail of one doozy of a weirdo. A long-haul trucking man-made monster built from the body parts of the deceased. Some kind of Frankenstein, or Truckenstein, if you will. Reanimating the bodies of the dead to drive a truck across the country is no big deal. It happens all the time. The problem is, this Truckenstein likes to destroy electric cars and suck the juice from their batteries. He doesn't mind killing their owners either. I knocked back my last swig of coffee, a special blend of 70% liquid and 30% grounds, then stepped out of my truck and into the chilly night air of the Mojave. I removed a worn Battlestar Galactica lunchbox from beneath my seat. Inside was a roll of Scotch tape and a small pill bottle. My secret weapon. Popping my hinged belt buckle forward, I taped 2 blue capsules to the back. My 2 aces. I bought them off this homeless fellow in Pensacola who claimed to be a back alley pharmacist and shaman. The guy seemed legit. He wore a stethoscope. No matter how severe the injury, these miracle pills healed you. The downside is you had to be drunk and near death before they'd work. And each hit took a year off your life. And once they wore off, your injuries returned. And it sounds like the negatives outweigh the positives, right? But these blue pills do more than put Humpty Dumpty together. They give him an edge, too. The Mack truck I'd been tailing the past few weeks was parked outside of a rundown shack masquerading as a dive bar called The Last Stop. Despite its appearance, the joint kept a steady stream of customers. Truckers, elderly motorcycle gangs, the occasional tourists looking for cheap food and cheaper beer, and me. Bill Witt and his kid Tim owned the place. I didn't mind them. I kind of liked them, actually. But they did not feel the same about me. My arrival meant a hefty repair bill, loss of customers, and dealings with the local authorities, which is an extra level of pain in the ass when your regulars pass substances of questionable legality around, like the church communion plate. Now, they may not care for me, but they understand the service I offer. A necessity for folks who make their livings on the back roads of America. Like I said, I've been trailing the weirdo for weeks now, riding his ass. Close, but never close enough. He carved a trail of carnage from Sacramento through Los Angeles and now to the last stop. The last bar you hit before the Mojave, and the last UV charging station until Arizona. Lord knows why Bill installed one outside of this shithole, but Truckenstein would need the extra juice for the road, and he wasn't getting his fix anywhere else. I circled the Mac. A cherry red cab with a "My truck don't leak oil, it sweats power" bumper sticker. Tied to the front grille was a dirty teddy bear in a "Show me your bobbers" fishing t-shirt. This was his alright. Real class act. Footprints that looked like they belonged to Bigfoot and work boots led from the truck to a neon yellow hybrid parked next to the charging station. The rear quarter panel of the car lay a good 20 feet away. A gust of wind filled my nose with a heavy smell of iron, stomach acid, and shit. My guts somersaulted, threatening to fill my mouth with this morning's gas station ham and cheddar sandwich. I knew that smell, and pulled a handkerchief from my back pocket to cover my face. I discovered you can't tie a knot tight enough to block out that stench. As I circled the hybrid, the carnage unveiled itself. A maroon explosion of gore splashed across the car, the electric pump, and half this side of the parking lot. And at the center of the blast was a blob of meat, a knee-high pile of human sloppy Joe mix. Someone must have caught Truckenstein mid-meal. I examined the clumps of blonde and red hair that topped the pulpy mass like two soggy wigs. Oh, I'll be damned. Meat Mountain wasn't a person, but persons, plural. If the two-toned hair wasn't a dead giveaway, the four legs sticking out of the sides were. I looked up from the steaming heap of people to the bar. A Billy Ray Cyrus song thumped its muffled thump, and I looked back at the meat. You've got a hell of a night ahead of you. The expression on Bill's face as I entered the bar told me he'd been expecting me. The place was empty except for Bill, Tim, the 5 dead bodies strewn across the bar and pool table, and the massive brick wall of a man sitting at the bar. I could tell tonight was going to be a rough one. Mind? I asked Truckenstein and motioned to the seat next to him. He looked at me, then grunted. I took it for a yes and slid onto the seat. Bill knew my flavor and poured me a shot of whiskey. Cheers, I said to Truckenstein, and downed the shot, then tapped for a second. Long night? No response. Yeah, me too. Got a feeling it's about to get longer. I gulped my shot, then tapped for a third. The jukebox switched from one Billy Ray song to another. Hey Tim, I don't know if you own a snow shovel or power washer, but you got a mess outside. He gulped, then ran out the door like his ass was catching. I returned my attention to Truckenstein, who continued acting like I wasn't there. I was snooping around your truck? Wouldn't have figured you for a Silicon Valley boy. He took a long pull from his bottle and kept staring straight ahead. So, what scam product does your CEO daddy have you running? It must be important. Progress, he said, and faced me. I got a good look at his ugly green stitched-up mug. Your average, run-of-the-mill Frank, bolts and all. Was that a tire iron in his head? Oh, Daddy wouldn't invest the capital in giving you a better face? I'm a good shit talker, but I'm not the best fighter, at least when the opponent is bigger than me, my size, or a child. No one's perfect at their job. We've all got areas for improvement. I'm good at drinking and taking a hit, though. He slid one massive foot back. Here comes the punch. I downed my last shot. He swung, and I stumbled, falling on my ass. There was a sound like an exploding watermelon, followed by a spray of blood as his fist whooshed over my head. I got to my feet, cocked my fist, and swung. My hand connected with the side of his thick, hammy head. Several things, probably the bones in my fist, popped as my knuckles remolded themselves on his face. Truckenstein grabbed and lifted me off the ground. Someone behind us screamed. We stopped fighting. Tim stood in the bar's doorway, holding a blood-stained shovel. He whimpered and sniffled. "He's dead!" The monster lowered me to the ground and we exchanged confused looks. "The big guy?" I said, pointing to the jolly green giant holding me by the face. "Yeah, no shit." "No, you idiot! You killed my dad!" We followed Tim's gaze to Bill, still standing right behind the bar. The top of his head was missing. He was dead, all right. That explains the blood and watermelon sound. Sorry, man. Let me finish things here and I'll buy you a drink, I said. "Fuck you! Fuck both of you!" And he left. Unbelievable. Suddenly, I was airborne. My back struck the wall behind the bar. Glass and booze exploded around me. I rolled off onto the still-standing Bill, who crumpled under my weight. Truckenstein reached over the bar and grabbed me again. The next thing I knew, I was flying into the jukebox, still holding Bill's body. I don't know why. 3 shots of whiskey and severe brain trauma will make you do stupid things. Luckily, my neck broke our fall. I tried to lift Bill's corpse to throw it at Big Green and buy myself time, but it was a stupid idea, and I was drunk. He was heavy and kind of just flopped over. Shit! Truckenstein cleared the floor in seconds. He grabbed me and threw me into the ceiling, then caught me and spun me twice before flinging me back behind the bar, shattering the remaining bottles and possibly my spine. I couldn't feel anything below my waist, and the parts I could feel above my waist hurt like hell. Something mushy inside me poked something sharp and the mushy thing deflated. It was hard to breathe. I knew the feeling. I was dying. Perfect. I popped my belt buckle forward. An untouched bottle of Jack lay within reach. I grabbed it and popped the pills along with 2 plugs of the Jack to wash them down. Dry swallowing was never my thing. The gel capsules hit my stomach. I felt a brief pang of discomfort as they dissolved before a sudden, dreamy euphoria floated through my body. I was one with the universe. A sudden blinding pain racked my body as the pills worked their magic. They sealed wounds and rebuilt broken bones. I was a new man. I made a finger gun with my index and middle finger, and my hand remolded itself. Bones and meat shifted, transforming the 2 fingers into the barrel of a throbbing, fleshy magnet. Remember that edge I mentioned? I stood up. A stool flew past me, splintering onto the back of the bar. The monster said, "Beware, for I am fearless, and therefore powerful." Oh yeah? How about a knuckle sandwich? Thump! A missile of meat and bone erupted from my hollow fingertips. The bullet whizzed past Big Green, taking a chunk of his ear with it, and showering him with bits of the novelty clock that hung on the wall behind him. "What the hell?" he said. "Franken die, bitch!" I said, and jumped over the bar. I fired again. The slug planted itself in his chest, throwing him back onto the pool table, flattening under his weight. Screwball, corner pocket. He got to his feet and appraised the sizzling hole above his right pec. Through the gaping wound, a cartoon beer bottle riding a sign that read, "It's drink o'clock," winked at me in flashes of neon. Truckenstein fingered the ragged edges. "What is that thing?" "My finger bang," I said, taking slow aim at the big green lug. My mind said action hero, but my body said you've drunk too much. Thump! My aim was off. The shot ricocheted off the tire iron in his head and into the lights above the pool table. A pop of light and electricity, and then darkness. I wondered if he could see in the dark. He could. The first swing of the pool cue hit me between the eyes. The second hit me in the groin. Then he hit me in the groin again, and again, and again. Pick another target! Gladly. The pool cue came down on my head, and I fell. "One more for luck," he said, hitting me in the groin again. His hands were on me, gripping my gun hand, raising my arm above my head. He squeezed. I felt the soft pop of flesh and bone inside his meaty mitts. The pills do a good job of taking the edge off, but no amount of pills can blunt the pain of an exploding hand. Truckenstein flung me back through the swing doors and outside, skidding through the gravel. Tim, or Tims, looked surprised to see me. Was they, holding a gas can or cans? My double vision cleared. The potent scent of gasoline hung heavy in the air as Tim sloshed the gas along the front of the bar. He muttered to himself, something about how he'd kill the monster, then me. I don't know, it seemed kind of petty. He lit a match, and the place went up. I looked toward the parking lot and the 5 empty gas cans. Kid been busy. I heard the pump of a shotgun and turned my attention back to Tim. He stood over me with his gun pointed at my face. Behind us, screams of "Fire bad!" and "I expected this reception! All men hate the wretched! How then must I be hated? Who am I, miserable beyond all living things?" Echoed into the night as the building burned. "You killed my dad," Tim said. "Please, the pills are wearing off," and he hit me in the balls. "Also, blame the big monster man's fist." Tim lowered his shotgun. "Shit. I can't look a man in the eyes and shoot him. Thank God. Roll over." But he raised his shotgun. "Roll over." Shit, this was a tight spot. Taking in my options, I did what any sensible fellow would do. I kicked the barrel of the shotgun. Tim fired, peppering the ground next to my head. "Fucker!" he said, and pumped the gun. "No, you're the fucker. My comeback aim was still strong. I grabbed a handful of gravel and flung it in his face. He stumbled backward and fired again. A few lucky pellets hit my calf. I scrambled to my feet and hobbled toward Truckenstein's trailer. "Please have some secret weapon or something useful in there." I heard him yell, "You suck!" Boom! A circle of holes appeared in the trailer. "Your mom sucks! My mom's dead! So's your dad, you shitty little orphan!" Behind me, Tim cried. I told you I was good at talking shit. Lucky for me, Truckenstein didn't lock his trailer. Why would he? He was a 7-foot-tall monster who'd pulp anyone attempting to touch his truck. I lifted the latch, letting the door slide upward. Inside sat stacks of boxes. No way. I couldn't believe it. I'd seen the ads on TV late at night, sandwiched between commercials for dirty talking call lines. Tim speed-walked towards me, still spitting out dirt. He pumped the shotgun, took aim, then noticed the boxes. "Are those what I think they are?" "The microwave remote," I said, removing the package from a box. "Weren't they recalled?" "Yeah, holding metal made the radio waves lobotomize anyone who stood between the remote and the microwave." "Hey, do you smell bacon?" From behind us came a roar. Truckenstein grabbed Tim and flung me from the trailer. Big Green was still alive, except he was naked and more crispy black than green. A little melty looking, too. "Should I feel kindness toward my enemies? No. From this moment I declare everlasting war against the species, and more than all, against you!" He raised Tim above his head, above that tire iron sticking out of his brain. I fumbled with the microwave remote's packaging. Damn twisty ties. I removed the remote from the package. Please have batteries, I thought, and hit the microwave button. Sparks flew from the spot where the tire iron and forehead touched, and electricity arced from the tip of the tire iron to every bolt on his body. His head swelled and exploded, showering me with meat and brain. Every piece missed Tim. Luckily Irish, or Greek, or Italian. I'd have to ask him. The point is, I'm mad someone upstairs is playing favorites. "Thanks for saving me," he said, offering a clean hand to me. I made him grab my hamburger helper hand out of spite when I felt the electrical charge leave my body. The drug ran its course. There was a sharp poke of pain in my back, then another. Every cut I'd received from my tango in the bar opened. My body spasmed. Skin split open, bruises rose to the surface, and blood squirted from every cut and visible orifice. I screamed in pain. I might have peed a little too. "Holy shit, what just happened?" He stared in horror at my convulsions. Good, maybe this'll win me some sympathy points. "I need to go to the hospital." Tim ruminated on this, then asked, "You got $50? And can I drive your truck?" Yes, and yes. He helped me to my feet and we hobbled to my truck together. Do you still want to kill me? I've seen enough death and destruction tonight. I think I'll collect the insurance on the bar and retire to a tropical island. Are we friends now? More like shaky acquaintances. You know, I helped destroy the bar too. Tim looked at me like I said something offensive. Are you serious? I'm not sharing my money with you. You see what I mean? Underappreciated.
I'd already attacked and tied Tim to the center post of the cabin when Matt arrived. The three of us had planned a camping trip. We rented a small cabin at the edge of a lake. It was nice. We came to celebrate our recent sobriety. One weekend together before we returned to our old lives. We were friends. We trusted each other. Now, one of us sat cross-legged on the floor, tied to a post. "What's going on?" Matt asked. "That's not Tim," I said, double-checking the knots I'd tied in the ropes. "He's some kind of monster." "She hit me with a boat paddle," Tim said. He tilted his head so Matt could see the spot where the edge of the paddle hit him. His dishwater blonde hair was dark and matted with blood. "That's true. I hit him with the paddle," I said. "Only because that's not Tim. It's some kind of monster in a Tim suit." "Are you okay?" Matt asked him. "Yeah, but my head hurts. I think I have a concussion. Can you untie me?" Matt went to do just that, but I grabbed his arm and stopped him. "Don't," I said. "That's not Tim." The frustration on his face gave way to sadness, and I knew what he was thinking. I couldn't hold his gaze, so I looked away. "Jess, have you been—" "No. Please don't lie to me." "I haven't," I said in a voice louder than I meant. He nodded, but the sadness on his face remained. Matt pulled his arm free of my grasp and went to Tim. He bent down and removed a Swiss Army knife from his pocket. He opened the file and parted Tim's hair to get a better look. A thin slice ran across the crown of his head. The cut was deep and a good 5 inches long. "You did a number on him. Doesn't look serious, but he'll need stitches." He touched the file to the edge of the cut and eyed the depth of the injury. Tim winced and made a pained grunt. "Everything okay up there?" Tim asked. "Yeah, I'm more concerned about your concussion." "Are you feeling tired?" he said. Tim shook his head. "No, I'm all right." "I'd like you to untie me." "Sure," Matt said, and he laid the Swiss Army knife on the ground by the post. "Don't do it, Matt." I ran to the paddle I had struck him with. It leaned against the kitchen bar, nestled between the bar stools. I grabbed it and raised the paddle above me like a hockey player. Dried blood still covered the paddle blade. "Untie me, man. She's gone off the deep end." Tim struggled beneath the ropes, but Matt remained calm. He rose slowly to his feet and stepped away from the knots he was about to untie. His hands held high in the air. "All right, Jess. I won't untie him, but I need you to put the paddle away and tell me what you mean. I need an explanation for this." He spoke in a voice that was flat and controlled, like a negotiator in a hostage situation. His tone made me feel like I was crazy, and the fact I held a paddle covered in the blood of a man I tied to a post didn't help me feel any more sane. Maybe I was crazy. I thought he went swimming in the lake and something attached itself to his face. Something sort of squid-like or fish. I'm not sure. I saw him struggling to reach the shore, and I ran to help him. This thing was in his mouth, forcing itself down its throat, choking him. I tried to pull it out, but couldn't get a grip. The only thing I could do was to get him to the shore. But by that time, he had passed out and swallowed the thing. I laid him on the sand. He looked dead, Matt. I thought we'd lost him. But then he suddenly sat up like nothing happened. Then he just wandered up to the cabin. Matt patiently listened to my story. His brows furrowed and his lips tightened in disappointment. I knew that look well. I'd been on its receiving end countless times throughout my stay at the rehab center. I committed myself. Matt checked in at the same time I did. Though he did so because of a court order, he was a model patient. I was not. Despite that, we became friends. Without him or Tim, who is on his third tour of duty, I wouldn't have made it through the program. Out of all the times I'd been on the receiving end of that look, this one hurt the most. Listen, I know this sounds insane, and after saying it out loud, I don't blame you for thinking I'm crazy. But I'm telling you, I know what I saw. Ask her what she had in her hand, Tim said with a playful lilt to his voice. Matt's eyebrow raised. Well, my face felt hot and my throat tightened. I looked away. Thought so, he said, and he returned to freeing Tim. Matt, I'm not lying. I ran to him. My hand gripped his shoulder and I pulled him away from the knots. When I ever lied to you, I was always honest with you. Matt stared into my eyes with the clinical look I'd seen in the eyes of the doctors at the rehab center when they tried to suss out if you were lying. I held his stare. Believe me, I said, and meant it. Is there alcohol in this cabin? He asked. Yes, there is. I found a couple of bottles in Tim's bag. I was going to confront him about it, and then I saw him struggling in the water. She's lying, Matt. Untie me before we both end up tied to this post. Check his bag, I said. Matt walked to the bunk beds at the far wall. He yanked Tim's duffel bag off the top bunk. Clothing, toiletries, and a thick gray towel folded around something fell to the floor with a heavy clunk. Matt looked over his shoulder at Tim and stepped on the corner of the towel. He kicked the middle of the towel with his other foot. It unfolded, and the bottle of whiskey hidden inside slid across the floor. Matt picked it up. His eyes kept their calm, clinical gaze as he marched towards Tim, who sputtered and panicked, trying to think of an excuse. Matt squatted to Tim's level and held the partially drunk bottle up to his face. She planted it there, I swear. Matt didn't respond. Matt, this is ridiculous, Tim said. Matt looked into Tim's eyes and said, You're lying to me. Tim nodded his head, resigned to the fact we had caught him. He rested the back of his head against the post. He chuckled and he smiled. Why can't anything be simple, he said. Then rose off the floor and kicked Matt in the chest with both feet. Matt sprawled backward across the floor. Tim's body swelled against the ropes, and they snapped. Matt got back onto his feet. Tim moved in and punched him in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Matt dropped to his knees, coughing. Tim delivered a swift kick to his lower jaw that laid him out flat on his back. Matt was down for the count. "I wanted this to be clean," Tim said, removing his shirt before grabbing the skin at his waist and peeling it off like a sweater, revealing the amphibious creature beneath. He seemed to grow larger once he was free of the constrictive Tim suit. "Enjoy a nice, relaxing weekend with no incidents." He removed his boots. "Infect you two in your sleep." He shimmed out of the lower half of Tim like a pair of long johns. A belt with a holster and water pump appeared in a red glow. It hung slouched above the two newt-like legs. "Then go home with neither of you the wiser." He gripped the flaps of Tim's neck and pulled the head off like a rubber mask. The same red glow appeared over Tim's toothy mouth, then vanished, revealing a respirator. The tubes pumped water through the long cable that formed and connected to the pump at his waist. His large, slanted pupils shrunk as they adjusted to the light. I made the move to run, but Tim was faster. He grabbed me by the neck and raised me off my feet. He squeezed. Dark circles filled my vision. They grew in size as the cabin blurred and the darkness enveloped my world. I woke seated next to Matt on the ground, our backs tied to the post that I had tied Tim to. The front door was open and I could see Matt's truck backed up to a large metal saucer at the edge of the lake. A glowing red rectangle appeared on the front of the disc, like a window shade being drawn. The door flashed, and Tim appeared. He carried a metal crate under each arm and set them into the back of Matt's truck bed. He returned to the red door and entered. With a bright flash, he vanished inside. After a moment, the door flashed again, and Tim appeared with two more metal crates that he took to Matt's truck. He set one in the back of the truck and carried the other into the cabin. Matt groaned and came to. "What happened?" he said. "Good question," Tim said. He set two glass canisters on the kitchen counter. Inside floated two creatures, like the one I saw attack Tim in the water. They looked like a cross between a squid and a tadpole. "I planned to do this when you both were asleep. The hosts struggle when they're awake." The water pumped rhythmically with each of Tim's breaths, from his mask to the pump attached to his belt. He removed the lid from the canister and stuck his hand inside. Clear liquid oozed down the sides of the canister. Tim removed the tadpole and carried it over to Matt. He squatted in front of him, holding the tadpole level with Matt's mouth. The tadpole squirmed. Long strands of slime flicked from its tail and the tentacle-like arms and legs that coiled against his body. Tim pressed the tadpole against Matt's lips, and it came alive. The creature thrashed its head from side to side, forcing its head into Matt's closed mouth. It grunted and interrupted as it pushed against his clenched teeth. Tim grabbed Matt by the sides of his mouth and squeezed. His mouth opened. The tadpole squirmed forward into his throat. Slime foamed at the corners of Matt's mouth. Wet, slopping sounds filled the cabin. Tim gagged and clutched the front of his filtration mask. The process doesn't sound as disgusting when you're asleep. Matt gagged. and the tadpole sunk further down his throat with a wet slurp. Tim heaved. I gotta get out of here. He grabbed the empty canister and headed for the door, stopping short. He turned to me. I'll be back for you later, he said, then waddled towards his ship. My eyes darted around the room, landing on the pocket knife with the file extended. I reached for the body of the knife with my boot, and I came up short, scooting my rump forward and sliding down the pole as far as the ropes allowed. I tried again. The body of the knife popped out from beneath my boot, spinning around on the ground. Next to me, Matt gagged. Foam mixed with blood dripped down his chin as the tadpole forced itself deeper into his throat. Small tears formed at the sides of his mouth. Snot flew from his nose with every forced exhale. I scooted my butt further forward. The ropes cut into my arms and stomach. I lowered my foot slowly onto the leather punch tip of the file and pulled it towards the edge of my rump, then reached for the knife. My fingers felt the edges of the knife for the large blade. I opened the blade after several tries and set to work, cutting the bottom braid of the rope. Matt had passed out. Snot still flared from his nose. He was still alive. The torso of the tadpole was in his mouth. Its head was now a massive lump in his throat. The blade cut through the bottom cord of the rope, and the rest went slack. I shifted beneath their coils. Freeing my elbow with the extra range of motion, I jabbed the knife at the tadpole. The blade dug deep into the tadpole's side. Slime flew from its flailing tail, sticking to everything it touched in thick, clear gobs. I pushed the knife deeper into the tadpole until the side of my hand pressed against the thing's body. The tadpole worked itself backward out of Matt's mouth and landed on the ground, flopping like a fish. Matt gasped for air. I swung the heel of my boot down with all the force I could manage on top of the tadpole's snapping head, right between the pits where its eyes should have been. I brought my foot down again, this time crushing the head beneath the heel of my boot. Beside me, Matt fought to loosen the surrounding ropes. The Tim creature knocked on the frame of the open door before peeking its head inside the cabin. How are things going in here? Despite the mask, the look of horror on Tim's face was apparent when he noticed the dead tadpole at our feet, lying in a pool of foaming green blood. The knife was stuck in its side and had a boot-sized dent in its head. Tim bent down and poked it with his claw, then rolled it over. He rose to his feet and removed what looked like a dollar store laser gun from his holster. Tim aimed the gun at us. Matt jumped him, and Tim fired. A bright burst of light erupted from the candy apple red ball of the muzzle, and Matt's left leg evaporated in a pink light. But there was no blood. I grabbed the boat paddle. Tim turned his laser gun on me, but Matt bit his leg. The beam missed, and I swung the paddle down onto his head, striking the same spot I'd hit him last time. Tim staggered backward in a daze. The laser gun fell from his hand. I seized the gun and fired. Tim burst into a bright, fuzzy pink outline and disappeared. With a loud exhale, I dropped the gun and joined Matt on the floor. We sat there and silently processed everything. We didn't move from the floor for a while. Matt lifted the blackened stump of his leg, cut off at the knee, and stared at it. "That's unfortunate," he said. It doesn't look too bad, I said. The burn was smooth and clean, except for the char marks. It looked as if he'd never had a leg at all. Let's get out of here. Preferably to a hospital, he said. And I agreed. I eased Matt into the passenger side of the pickup truck, then climbed behind the wheel and started the truck. It wasn't until we turned onto the first paved road and could see the small lights of houses in the distance that I broke the silence. Matt, I said. He didn't respond. Thanks for trusting me. He smiled. I guess the trip was a success.
It was September and the sun had set early. My girlfriend Rachel and most of our friends were at the homecoming week bonfire. I was not. Instead, I sat in the park with my best friend, Mike. This weekend was our first homecoming dance, and he didn't have a date. Mike sat next to me on the bench. I watched him measure his torso with his hands, then cluck his tongue. Shelley will say no. I'm too short. You're fine. Philip is 2 inches shorter than you. He and Emily have been going steady since middle school, I said. That's different. He's got great hair, Mike said. I rolled my eyes. Mike chewed his bottom lip and poked and prodded and pinched his body. Why would she want to go out with me anyway? I'm all leg and no torso. You're no less torso than anyone else. You wouldn't know. There's a science to this stuff. I leaned forward and rested my elbows on my knees. Says who? People online, Mike said. You need a break from the people online. He got up from the bench. Look here. He stepped onto the path and stood underneath the lamplight. Shadows obscured his eyes and strengthened the creases in his brow. They stretched his features so his face looked like that of a man twice his age. Mike held up his arms. He dropped them down to his sides. Do you see? I shrugged. What am I looking for? He held his arms out and dropped them again. My arms. They're too long for my torso. I looked. They looked the same length as anyone else's arms. I told him so. He shook his head. I'm uneven. He balanced on one foot. I watched him wobble side to side and thought he might fall. He pointed his arms out and steadied himself and stood up straight. See my leg? Too long. My torso's too short for the rest of me. He held the pose and looked at me expectantly. You look normal to me, I said. Whatever. He dropped his leg, then sat back down on the bench. We listened to the crickets chirp from the overgrown weeds behind the baseball mound. Sprinklers clicked and sprayed water across the baseball field. The summer breeze brought us the smell of wet grass. There has to be something I can do. Stretch myself out somehow. If I was taller, then maybe I'd have the confidence to ask Shelley to homecoming. I picked at something under my fingernail. Don't you think you're being dramatic? How so? I flicked the bit of fingernail dirt away. Rachel said she told Shelley that you were going to ask her to dance. Shelley got giggly and played with her hair a lot. What does that mean? I don't know, that she likes you. Listen, you're an average height, you're funny and the girls like you. It's not like you're ugly. It would be harder to get a date if you were ugly. I might as well be ugly. I'm short enough. That makes no sense, I said. Mike turned his body to face me. Plenty of people online say short guys can't get girls. They say that deep down. Girls don't want shorties like me. That's a broad claim. Rachel says Shelley likes you. I could ask her out if I wasn't so short. Mike rested the back of his head on the back of the bench and looked up at the sky. I did the same. The moon was halfway to full. The light was enough you could see the entire park and the baseball field beyond. Mike chewed his lower lip. He sighed, then got up from the bench. He dusted off the back of his khaki shorts. I think I'm gonna head home. Yeah, me too. We said goodbye. I watched him go. But before he was out of sight, I called to him. He turned. I'll ask Rachel to talk to Shelley again. Get a verbal confirmation. He nodded. See you tomorrow, I said. He turned back around and left. The next day, he wasn't at school. When he didn't show the day after that, I texted him. He didn't respond, so I called. No answer. The third day came and still no Mike. So after school, I went to his house. His mother answered the door. She looked tired. Dark rings circled her red eyes, and I could tell she'd been crying. Come in, she said. I'll let Michael know you're here. The inside of the house was dark, except for the living room. I looked in. Outlined in the blue glow of the TV was Mike's father. He sat on the couch like a stone sculpture. His face was expressionless, a beer clenched in his fist. Empty cans littered the floor and coffee table, cylindrical pigeons surrounding a grand statue. I followed her to the base of the stairs, and she called up to Mike. Her voice cracked when she said his name. He replied, Coming. Mike's bedroom door opened. From inside the room, the silhouette of some great bulk dragged itself out onto the landing. At the sight of it, Mike's mother cupped her hands to her mouth and rushed into the living room. She pushed through the empty cans and threw herself onto the couch, burying her face into her husband's shoulder. Her muffled cries were faint. He remained a statue. Above me, the shape dragged itself towards the stairs. It stopped, paused, caught its breath, then dragged its length forward, only to stop, pause, breathe, and start again. The shape reached the edge of the stairs and peered around the base of the banister. It was Mike. Panting and covered in sweat, his mouth stretched into a smile that showed all his teeth. I've done it. He grabbed the lip of the step, and with a grunt, heaved his great length down the stairs, a long, blotchy tube of flesh carved by lightning bolts of gleaming red stretch marks pulled tight and threatening to split apart. Do you think she'll say yes now? I stared at the great, slow-moving thing, trying to understand. A haze of dread clouded my mind, and it became impossible to breathe. I felt suffocated. Suddenly, I took a great gulp of air, then screamed. I ran from the house and never went back. As a child, I loved to watch the snakes in my mum's garden as they slithered over the decorative shale with their long bodies. I was never afraid of them, but it's easy to be afraid when the snake wears your friend's face.